Well, hello, that's me again. Today is the 30th of June, and this is Friday, and people are going on the long weekend for the 4th of July, which is good, and we're gonna be celebrating 4th of July too. But let me start today with some sort of not really sit rep, but I want to put Prigozhin's story to rest now, and because I'm sick and tired discussing this guy, and as many people noticed in my comment section, that for many months I wasn't the guy who was enthusiastically endorsing operations by Wagner and obviously behavior by Prigozhin. But well, they noticed correctly because I knew already then from my sources what was going on, but you know what, you don't go out and just spread things and say, oh, this is just what I got, because we needed a kind of the confirmation of those things, and guess what, boy, did we get a confirmation. So, and here what I want to put it to rest, all this baloney and speculations. Here's Mr. Matveyev yesterday in Izvestia. It's establishment, actually 2 days ago, establishment newspaper, obviously a very important one with a long tradition. And here Oleg Matveyev, who is a member of parliament, he's member of Duma, and he is deputy chair of the committee of the State Duma on the informational policy and informational technologies and communications. And here he writes an article about the reasons and results of the mutiny by Prigozhin and Wagner. And the article has a very symptomatic title, which is called "At the Broken Trough." And he talks about the broken trough after the famous Russian, I believe there also is present in some sense in the European fairy tales tradition about the fisherman and the fish, and who the guy basically, his wife gets the hold of the news that he has communication with the fish, who grants desires, and eventually she wants to become even higher than the fish herself, who is basically for all intents and purposes has a divine abilities. And guess what? Going from the broken trough to almost aristocratic status, and then ending up, at broken trough again. And this is also basically the story of unbecoming. And this is not enough, or rather, it is enough to talk about it. And I want to point out also to another thing, which is, it's not Q&A session today, but actually it relates obviously to many questions which people ask in the discussion boards, and I may need to do the full-blown Q&A video on this on this and other issues. But I want to point out to question which many people ask, and this is about like, wow, how Ukrainians can continue to do this when you begin to look at actually their losses, which are catastrophic. And let me, I don't want to talk about it from my, just from me personally, from my point of view. I want to quote here the man who you probably wouldn't suspect of being sympathetic to Russia and Russian policies and Russian armed forces. And his name, of course, Mr. Arestovich. And Mr. Arestovich was the spokesperson for Zelensky for a while. Obviously, a few months ago, he got a whiff of the changes, and he stopped basically BSing his way through the political corridors of power in Kiev, and he decided that being the Baghdad Bob, or Kiev Bob, if you wish, was enough for him, and he simply bowed out from the sinking ship, basically. And here he speaks to some political guys in Ukraine, and he explains that Ukrainians are like geese. They are not capable of producing or processing information generally on the general national level, and you can obviously find easily his whole, it's diatribe to a degree, but there is a lot of truth to it. And he's talking about that, yeah, they are limitrophs. They never produced anything, any kind of great scientists, great, whatever. And so he talks about the very high level, or rather low level, we would say, here, of tolerance to being completely brainwashed. And guess what? He's talking about that the Ukrainians are brainwashed, and as he says himself, not only they behave like geese, but they also, you can basically tell them any lie and they will believe it. And this is exactly what is happening right now with them, or not only right now, for the last 8 years. And I can tell you one thing, you can also find this video. There were Ukrainian scientists, quote unquote, who stated that the actual Ukrainian language is actually, its origin is on the Venus, the planet, yes, the second planet from the sun. And yeah, this famous meme, which is not really meme, they believe that they really dug out the Black Sea. This is the level of the idiocy even Nazi Germany didn't have. And so now you have this whole situation with Ukraine, and that explains to you, apart from the fact that they are really catching now people on the streets, trying to throw them into the meat grinder in eastern, whatever left of eastern Ukraine, and that's pretty much explains it. I'm on record, I can repeat the story again. They still think that Russians, for example, don't have enough toilets, that they've been taking the microchips from washing machines, and that when Russians kind of capture yet another village or town in Ukraine, the first thing they do, they run into their bathrooms and unscrew those toilets to be shipped to Russia. And again, it's really sad. A few years back, I mean, there was this Ukrainian mother with her son, young son, I don't know, 12, 13, and they were, on this boat, tourist boat on the Moskva River, passing by there, and Moscow is stunning. I mean, it's absolutely stunning. And they were passing by, Moscow City, and these are tallest skyscrapers in Europe, actually. And she was saying to her son that, yeah, this is because of us, Ukrainians, who gave Russians all that aerospace. Even they say actually Pushkin probably was also Ukrainian. So, and this is what it is. I mean, this is the basically setup which is shared by a huge portion of the Ukrainian population. And that's why they still throw those people under Russian fire, and they die in the horrendous quantities. And so that brings us to the issue of their losses for today, aggregate losses, as reported by Russian Defense Ministry. And as you can see yourself, this is the basically 26 days of their counteroffensive, so to speak, and by that time we have about 21,505 KIAs annihilated, and aggregate from November 2022, 103,627 killed of the Ukrainian armed forces. And again, I always stress that a Russian Defense Ministry is very, very conservative in its assessments. And now, because of these events happening, and then of course we have the Chromatarsk issue, which, as we know now, there were very many so-called mercenaries, like, the guy from he has the US flag on his helmet, and he was there, but there were a number of generals and high-level officers in Chromatarsk hotel annihilated, and that obviously doesn't bode well for command and control issues of the armed forces of Ukraine. But there were also many, very many actually, the foreign fighters, foreign mercenaries killed there. And as you can see yourself, and even if you go to the video, you can hear primarily English language speech, so to speak. So, and when we look at this, and it's just putting together those things, it becomes clear that things are going really badly. And as I spoke on a number of occasions now, be that when I spoke with Thomas and James Kunstler, or when I spoke to Mike Krupa's podcast with me, Larry Johnson, and Ray McGovern, that the watershed moment probably will be. It doesn't mean that it's 100% guarantee, but it will be the so-called NATO summit in Vilnius. And that will probably, in some sense, influence what Russians will do, either prior to this to provide some nasty surprise for those people there, or after. And this is what we need to come down to, this again, the issue of how United States and NATO supplies its weapons to armed forces of Ukraine. And it goes without saying that they don't do that well, to put it mildly. And obviously, as I already stated, number of Wunderwaffen from NATO countries, and especially from the United States, have been already basically exposed as absolutely useless in the modern battlefield, and be that Patriot PAC-3 complexes, which Poland now asks for. Why? I don't know. It's not going to help it if really big, some substance hits the fan. But you know what? Poland would love to buy any kind of junk from the United States, but this is just one part of it. We can see now what is happening with those Bradleys, with those Leopard tanks, and as the result, we can see also the news, so to speak, although that was not really the news. It's actually a rumor from the Wall Street Journal, who talking about the possibility of the United States supplying ATACMS. ATACMS is the official senior urgency after long reluctance to provide advanced missile system. ATACMS is not that advanced to start with. Its range is it's a tactical ballistic missile. It's kind of poor man's Iskander. That's what it is. And yeah, it's obviously dangerous, as any long-range weapon system will be. And obviously, what they write in the Wall Street Journal is absolutely ridiculous, but it's coping. They need to kind of cover up their butt hurt and being sore losers. But look what they say. The U.S. has been considering approving a long-range missile system for Ukraine. American and European officials said a move that would come as Russia grapples with unrest in its military leadership. There's no unrest. And uncertainty on the battlefield. Of course, these are wet fantasies by those losers who work in the Wall Street Journal. It can provide only propaganda. But that's the point. Will it change any kind of the outcome? No, ATACMS will not change anything. And what they need to understand, that as anything like Storm Shadow, which actually has a longer range than the ATACMS, it will be dealt with the Russian air defense. And Russia has now in place good ISR capability, actually excellent. So, and Wall Street Journal gives again in its wet dreams the range, the map of the ranges of those things, of this ATACMS thing. You know, it's bright red, it's the block 1 ATACMS, the orange or whatever the carrot type color is the block 2 ATACMS range, and they want to show that yeah, it's gonna cover Sevastopol and even parts of Russian territory. Well, obviously we know that once they start doing things into the Russia proper, things will change dramatically, not only for Ukraine, but for NATO. But apart from this, we need to keep in mind that immediately after the publication of this thing in Wall Street Journal, the spokesperson, I don't remember who, I believe, he went on the record from Pentagon and stated no decision was made, and there are doubts that it will be made. And again, Storm Shadow had a longer range, so it won't make any difference for the outcome. But you know what? Somebody needs to really start thinking about the reputation of the U.S. military-industrial complex, which produces absolute systems which actually do not work in real war. I mean, they still are dangerous, as any kind of firearm, for example, is dangerous. You know what? A 17th century musket is still dangerous when it hangs on the wall or on the gun rack, but yeah, in some stupid hands, and granted that you have some kind of powder and some projectile to load into it, it still will be dangerous. It still can kill, but obviously you cannot fight with it in the serious fight. And this is exactly what we see happening with the US weapons. And we have to keep in mind that even this, how to put it politely, and you know I'm always making basically jokes and mock all those kinds of the American publications, like for example the National Interest. But even this publication, which is a tabloid, 3 days ago that they begin to come up with such things like, oh my god, is US military gear too complex and expensive? And they said the battlefield conditions of Ukraine are demonstrating that American military equipment runs into practical problems in the field. Well, it's not just Ukraine situation, not just Ukraine weather or terrain, which of course very important for the operation. No, it is the fact of how the Western weapons have been done. And I mean done from the point of view of R&D and then going into the serial or mass production. And even this TNI has to, they cope, they need to constantly speak about how great they are, but you know, just those damn Russians. But here it is. That's what the guy from the National Interest continues to write. The lesson of the awful Ukraine war so far are many and varied. But something that has struck most observers is that while the Russians have been outmaneuvered, okay, they have been holding their own against modern Western military equipment by using old tanks and artillery, in particular American gear, while technologically advanced, is either not always the best choice on the battlefield, prohibitively expensive, or both. Well, for this guy, and here's, that's the guy, as you can see yourself, and when he writes about observers, I need to go to his curriculum vitae. The author of this drivel is Patrick Drennan. And as you can see yourself, Patrick Drennan is a journalist based in New Zealand with a degree in American history and economics. In other words, the guy is ignoramus, which is traditional, and this is basically the feature of the Western observers. Believe me, there are many Russians like this too. And of course, they have no clue what they're writing about. And that is why the thing which made me giggle was the fact that Russians somehow have been outmaneuvered. I mean, what can you say? But even those losers, they have to admit that basically, yeah, it doesn't matter what you do. The truth is, United States and NATO, they have zero experience in what is going on. That basically the military-industrial complex of the United States have been exposed for what it is. It's basically money laundering, money-making machine. And even when you go to the May, 2 months ago, when you have this guy, Milley, you know, he says investment in military capabilities are paying off, and he says, he continues to pronounce this, you know what, the pep talk, the BS. The US military is the most lethal and capable armed force in the world because previous administrations and Congress made the investment needed. Well, the problem, of course, it's not. United States military cannot handle the even near peer, let alone peer enemy. And one of the reasons for that, what I want to say, is not only because the United States has no experience whatsoever of planning the combined arms operations of this scale, but obviously they wouldn't be able to sustain this type of intensity of the conflict. And mind you, this is still special military operations. Russians do not fight war yet. If Russia would have been fighting war, my gosh, you wouldn't want to be on the receiving end, because it would have been a completely different calculus and forces involved. Even though from what we already see, it's, as I already stated, you know what, if somebody from Pentagon wants to kind of, discuss or debate me on this issue, I can tell you immediately, most of them, they have their jaws on the floor. They never saw and experienced anything like this. And then again, you know what, Mr. Cavoli, the Supreme Commander of the forces on NATO in, Europe, is on record about this, that they have no clue how to fight this. And to explain to you why also this is all very important, let me put it this way. Many people continue to speculate, especially fanboys. There are many fanboys from mom's basements who primarily work for the, like David X and all those American journals and American observers, quote unquote, who have no clue, never served a day in the armed forces, watch mostly movies about that and read books in the best case scenario. They don't understand that even if the United States, let's imagine, would decide to go against Russia in the conventional war. I'm not talking about nuclear war, but conventional. And we can take immediately that to even understand what it takes to do so. We can open, for example, the present Department of Defense from October, active duty military personnel. Well, it's just by rank, but we grade and service. We're not interested in that. We're just interested in the pure numbers of that. And when you look at this, you see yourself that basically what you have at this stage, you have about 463,000 active personnel in the Army. You have about 173 in the Marine Corps. Of course, there is also the National Guard. We're not talking about Air Force or Space Force. Those guys do not fight on the ground per se. And when you add this together, so you have about maybe, I would say 900,000, 850,000 of active military personnel, which would have to fight those damn Ruskies together with obviously European NATO, whatever they can master, before they completely disintegrate, as it happens right now in France, for example. And when you look at this, you have to say that, yeah, it's very interesting, of course, and Russia already kind of partially mobilized what we have, something like 700,000 people already, and Russia has about 2.5 million ready to mobilize immediately. It's a separate issue, but how are they going to fight it? They have to deliver everything, to Europe. I mean, you cannot, transfer everything, just in the blink of an eye, because it's all about logistics. And here we go to Rand. And yeah, I don't hold Rand in high esteem anyway, but even when they begin to write about it, they write about this. So many questions, so little time for Pacific logistics. Well, Pacific logistics obviously differs from the Atlantic logistics if the United States decides to fight Russia. And here we are. And as the horrendous expenditure of ammunition and human lives in Ukraine has shown, a war with China would have an insatiable appetite for reinforcements, munitions, and supplies, most of which would have to be moved over 6,500 miles or 10,000 kilometers from the West Coast to the West Pacific. Once those logistical essentials arrive in the Pacific Command area of operation, how do they cross the vast distances with Indo-PACOM? Well, let me tell you how they will cross this. This is how they are planned to be crossed. Look at this. This is so-called U.S. Navy's Military Sea Lift Command. And as you can see yourself, it kind of has a lot of ships. So some of them are pretty significant and respectable displacement. And when you look at this, at the sea lift and prepositioning forces, combatant support command and things of this nature, I can tell you that here they are. For example, this is one of such vessels, which is William Bohr. As you can see yourself, it's somewhere in Florida, actually it's Cape Canaveral, I believe, pier. It stands there. It's a large ship. It can take a lot of bulk, And then, of course, there are specially designed ships, which are ro-ro ships, such as Watson. These are the ships. This one is about 30,000 tons of displacement, and it can take up to 700 vehicles. it has enough basically space to take 700 vehicles, and you can see yourself the same ship Watson unloading some kind of the M270 or whatever the trucks or basically vehicles which can carry the said ATACMS or HIMARS, and it can get quite a bit of things from, for example, United States, Eastern United States, in hypothetical scenario of conventional war and United States going into the conventional war against Russia. And so they describe themselves like Sea Lift Command, prepositioning force, and prepositioning ships provide quick and efficient movement of military gear between operating areas without reliance on other nations' transportation network. These ships give U.S. regional combatant commanders the assurance that they will have what they need to quickly respond in a crisis anywhere, anytime. During a contingency, troops are flown into the theater of operations to rapidly employ the cargo from these ships. Well, correct. If you're talking about some traditional expeditionary force and beating the crap out of some third-rate, if not fourth-rate enemy. But currently we have, as I already stated, we have a lot of, almost 800,000 personnel in the U.S. ground forces. And here we are, this list of the divisions and regiments and brigades, which actually would have to be delivered to the European theater of operations in case they want to fight Russians. And I already showed you that they will be, their equipment obviously, will be delivered by those ships on the sea lift and prepositioning nature. And here it is. And here's some those interesting details, the devil in the details, which, for example, have been reported that U.S. Transportation Command in 2019 ordered 28 ships from a fleet of logistic ships to turbo activation. Well, guess what? There was a really big problem with those guys. Only 40% of those guys have been ready to go out to sea, which actually the turbo activation was something like between 48 to 96 hours. I don't remember exactly the number, but the point is, so it will take about, let's say up to 4 days to even get those ships from the partial readiness, load them, and send them out to sea. And here it is. In the event of major conflict with China or Russia, the Sea Lift would need to carry up to 90% of U.S. Army and U.S. Marine Corps equipment to the fight. Logistical activity that is a key to the United States deterrence strategy. After all, Russia and China don't have to fear the U.S. military if it can get to the fight. Well, I don't know about Chinese military. I certainly know that Russian military doesn't fear American military. And the point here is, that's what I'm trying to convey to people. It's all about logistics. This famous established proverb or wisdom, if you wish. While professionals speak about logistics, basically the amateurs talk about tactics. And that is why I don't do that much tactical minutia. I'm not interested in that. I know what they do. So if somebody wants to see how the stuff is being blown up, sure, and Russians continue to blow it up in industrial quantities. Now they use this new Wingman S-70 Hunter, Охотник UAV. There's nothing like this. The United States has nothing even comparable to this, and that thing is, just flies now combat missions. And when you look at this all together and you begin to see the situation with the logistics, you have to also ask this question. It takes 6 days to go from east coast of the United States to Europe. Have you heard about Russian Navy as of lately? Oh, yes, you did. And when you look at this, and I spoke about so many times, the problem with the forces and U.S. Army forces, which, whatever, Russians say, yeah, just bring it on. The issue here, the fundamental issue here, how do you ship those things in case of the real serious conventional war across the ocean, across the Atlantic Ocean? And here we have to really sit back and reflect on the fact that modern Russian weapons and their ranges are such that there is nothing US Navy can do to mitigate what would be the basically massacre of the military convoys across the Atlantic in case of the real war by Russian submarines. And which of course will start receiving zircons starting the 2024, while Russian fleet already carries the missiles, and as already stated, which are beyond the range of even the aviation of the carrier battle groups. So there you go. What are you gonna do? Can you defend against it? Oh, you saw yourself what happened, didn't you, with the PAC-3. 5 of them have been wiped out from the TOE of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. I'm not talking about other NASAMS, IRIS-T, what have you. They have been being killed in industrial quantities, and that means no matter what you do, the only thing which is left for the United States and NATO is to find the ramp off. They need the exit now, desperately. And judging by the change of the tone in the American media and Western media, even Forbes talking about, oh my God, the catastrophic losses of the armed forces of Ukraine. They really do not have the personnel anymore to fill in the gaps, even stopgap measures. And here it is. So what are you going to do? Do you want to start the war with Russia? I don't think so. Anybody in Pentagon wants that, except for some crazies who still think probably they are of the school of thought that the United States still won in Vietnam. There are some people like that who believe that. So what are you going to do? And we probably will know the answer by the NATO summit in Vilnius on the 12th, I believe, or 11th. Correct me if I'm wrong. And we'll take it from there. But obviously, I will be reaching out to you earlier than that. I probably will do a video before the 4th of July. And it's a wonderful holiday, you know, what we celebrate it, we grill, you know. And so, what can I say? This is my last video for this month, which is the month of June. And those who like what I do, please subscribe to my channel. And those who can afford, please support me on Patreon and buy me a coffee too. I, guys, do this because of you. And I really appreciate your help and support. And so, that's it. This is Friday. Have a nice weekend. And I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.